What they don't tell you about Chernobyl. An abandoned carnival. The town of Pripyat was just 1.25 miles from the doomed power plant. That's where the most of the people who worked at Chernobyl lived and raised their families. Today, Pripyat is a ghost town, and its prominent looming feature is the abandoned amusement park that still looks exactly as it did on the day of the disaster, except 1,000,000 times more creepy. It's almost as if the amusement park was a part of some grand plan to create the most sinister looking ruins anywhere in the world. What could better symbolize the tragedy of an abandoned town where thousands of children once lived and played than a disintegrating Ferris wheel, a set of bumper cars overgrown with vines, and the skeleton of a merry-go-round. Thriving wildlife. If you've ever watched The Simpsons, and we know you have, then you know that nuclear plus wildlife equals animals with lots of eyes. Funny thing about that though, not only do many animals live near Chernobyl, none have lots of eyes. They also don't have multiple heads, 12 rows of razor-sharp teeth, or extra kneecaps. In fact, according to Slate, the animals that live in the exclusion zone, which is a 1,000 square mile region around the Chernobyl nuclear plant, mostly don't have any physical abnormalities at all, which actually seems a lot more bizarre than those three-eyed Simpsons creatures we've all imagined must be lurking in the forests around Chernobyl. You're probably hideously disappointed, so hopefully this fact will comfort you. Horrible mutations were much more commonplace back in the early days of the disaster. Researchers found examples of dwarfism, gigantism, and glow-in-the-darkism in plants. The boring truth is that mutations in wild animals don't proliferate because most mutated animals don't survive for more than a few days before something takes them out. So if there ever were examples of mutated creatures at Chernobyl, they died before anyone could take note. USSR propaganda. 50,000 people lived in Pripyat, and 36 hours after the disaster, they were all evacuated from their homes, which in retrospect probably was actually enough time for at least some of them to become three-eyed Simpsons fish. According to The Guardian, townspeople were told they'd be back in their homes in a day or two, so there wasn't a need to pack much more than identity papers and a change of clothes. And while it is true that one day people will be able to live in Pripyat again, Soviet officials were about 23,000 years off the mark, give or take around 363 days. What is pretty cool about that hasty retreat followed by the never to return again thing is that Pripyat is like a snapshot of Soviet-era Ukraine. If a rapidly decaying radioactive snapshot, which is what makes the place so fundamentally charming, in a haunting, macabre sort of way. Soviet propaganda is all over Pripyat. There's a big room full of reasonably well-preserved portraits of Soviet leaders, a statue of a soldier who looks sternly resilient as the town crumbles all around him, and walls plastered with disintegrating murals, designed to helpfully remind the long-since vanished population how awesome it is to live under Soviet rule. Like the Soviet Empire itself, everything in Pripyat has fallen apart, and what remains is just a ghostly shadow of something that lives only in the history books. Silhouettes of missing townspeople. Most people try to get away from nuclear disasters. Others think, cool, let's break in with a can of spray paint. Graffiti artists said to be from Germany and Belarus must have missed the whole newsflash about deadly radiation. Or maybe they thought there was an off chance of obtaining superpowers. Like every third or fourth Marvel superhero, whatever their motivation, graffiti artists did sneak into the exclusion zone, and many left eerily beautiful works of art all over Pripyat and the surrounding areas. Some of the most striking graffiti is in Pripyat, where artists painted creepy silhouettes of the missing residents. In one room, a little girl with bows in her pigtails reaches for a light switch. Outside, a boy pulls a toy truck towards the corner of a building, as if to peer around it. On other walls, people appear to dance, and in another, 3 children are jumping, or maybe floating, holding on to each other in either exuberance or terror. It's probably not an accident that the silhouettes are eerily similar to the permanent shadows left on the walls and steps of buildings in Hiroshima after the nuclear attack that ended World War II. Visitors have described the Pripyat silhouettes as ghostly or haunting, and if the photos are anything to go by, the real-life experience of looking at those strange silhouettes must be downright unsettling. Mutated farm animals. Hopefully you've recovered from all that stuff about unmutated wildlife near Chernobyl, so now we can tell you about the horribly mutated farm animals that were born near the disaster zone. According to Thought Co., there was a spike in malformed farm animals just after the disaster, and again in 1989 and 1990. This is thought to coincide with the failure of the sarcophagus. That's the super creepy name chosen to the super creepy concrete tomb that the crews built around the failed reactor in the mad hope that it would stop leaking radiation or producing deformed farm animals. Among the mutations seen in the local cattle, pigs, goats and horses, crazily messed up faces, extra limbs, dwarfism, and weird colours. That last one actually seems acceptable, but most of the rest of them were mutations incompatible with life, which was quite sucky for everyone involved, especially the mutated animals. Piles of creepy dolls. Decades of horror movies have more than established this one simple fact of life. Old broken dolls are creepy, especially when they're hanging around nuclear ghost towns. Pripyat is full of old broken dolls, so many that there almost seems to be some weird horror movie creepy doll, mad scientist, cloning program going on somewhere in the town. Most likely in the vicinity of the sarcophagus. Whenever you go into Pripyat, creepy dolls stare at you. They sit on windowsills. They're propped up on skeletal bed frames. They're sprawled out in piles of debris. Some of them are even wearing gas masks. And while it's certainly tempting to think that everything you see in Pripyat is still in pretty much the same spot where it was left on the day of the evacuation, the more honest truth, according to the International Business Times, is that tourists looking for an awesome photo rearrange most of them for maximum creep factor. Some dolls may not even be original. There are plenty that look almost brand new, which suggests that tourists are most likely just bringing them along for the sake of Instagram. It does make sense, though it's a weird practice. No one is going to jump scare when they see an old doll in someone's closet, but when it's staring at you from the branches of a dead tree, let's just all pause for a moment to indulge in a collective shudder. The largest object ever moved by humans. The plant itself may not be as emotionally terrifying as the vacant eyes of a decomposing plastic doll staring at you from behind a broken window, but it's definitely the most terrifying part of the exclusion zone from a logical standpoint. Until recently, the only thing standing between the failed 4th reactor and the rest of the world was the massive sarcophagus, which was made from 14 million cubic feet of concrete and just over 8,000 tons of metal. According to the BBC, workers assembled the original sarcophagus in shifts, lasting 5 to 7 minutes each, because longer shifts might have actually killed them instantly, instead of resigning them to a long, painful, cancer-ridden death much later in life. The original sarcophagus was not known for its awesome powers of actually keeping radiation from leaking into the environment, hence the mutated farm animals of 1989 and 1990. But it took 20 years for engineers to come up with another solution. When the new sarcophagus was finally complete, the builders needed 18 ships and 2,500 trucks to actually move it and all of its parts from Italy to Chernobyl. It was finally installed in November 2016 and now stands heroically over the ruined reactor, forever annoying visitors who are hoping to break into the much less secure older version of the sarcophagus to take pictures of creepy dolls. Thank you so much for listening. Please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe for more videos in the future.